get started, and I want to welcome everybody here for our Forsyth Tech Exec meeting for Q1. We originally had a program start planned for this quarter. It was going to be NFTs, but you know, non-fungible tokens, and you're going to see that in the news a lot. But I got thinking about it, and I called up Bryson and I said, "Hey, you know, I'm reading about this thing that's happening over in Ukraine with Russia and cybersecurity, and I'm thinking about canceling this program and doing another one. What do you think?" I'm like, "Am I wrong? Is this a real thing?" And he says, "Yeah, it's absolutely a real thing." And he was very gracious and willing to help me put a program together. I'll bring Bryson up in just a minute, but I wanted to thank everyone for coming out. I think this program, our platform here with the Tech Exec group, is normally we do this with just networking within the tech community, but what's going on right now is so key to every business that we open it up to the wider audience. And we actually, you know, this is in the post-COVID world, we actually have as many people online right now as we do in the room. And I think I think I had someone as far away from Charlotte and Auburn, Alabama. So we'd like to do more programming like this, but hopefully under better topics, you know, that's not quite so negative, but this is the world that we live in. We need to adapt to it just like we adapted to COVID. We've got to adjust with what's going on. Anyway, I want to thank Steve Anderson. I don't think Steve's been able to make it here yet, but he is our title sponsor and helps us provide the resources that lets us put these programs on. And then next, I wanted to bring up Joe Rasper, who is Vice President for, Vice President for the Atlanta office, but for letting us use his office. And just FYI, some housekeeping stuff, I've turned your microphones on. These microphones don't project. These microphones are so the people that's online can hear us. So when you come up and speak, Steve, if you'll speak into the microphone, and you guys too, you should be good. But just wanted you to know, if you don't hear yourself, that's intentional. All right. But thanks, Joe, for letting us use your building.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly welcome everybody here to our facility in Alpharetta, the Forsyth Chamber of Commerce. My name is Joe Rasper. I'm the Vice President here at Empire office. And some of you may be thinking, I thought we were at the CAB office. In January, we went through a management change, and nothing's changed internally. We still got the same folks in place, still service the same clients. But the name DeKalb office, which stood for 70 years, believe it or not, has now changed to Empire. So again, we still handle the vertical markets for small to mid-sized businesses, corporate America, Fortune 500 companies, healthcare, education, and so on and so forth. And if you need a new office at home, you know who to call with the remote learning going on. So that's it. If you do need to go to the bathroom, it's right behind this wall right here. And you guys have a great meeting. Appreciate it.
Thanks again, Joe. Now, I'm going to introduce Dr. Payne. Bryson, I sometimes forget in a professional scenario, make sure I call him Dr. Payne, but I first got to hear about Dr. Payne, not here, but when I was in San Francisco at the RSA conference. RSA is probably one of the biggest cybersecurity conferences in the United States. I was fresh. I was just a couple months into my job, got in the opportunity to go to the RSA conference, and I was there as a delegation with people of the state of Georgia. And people kept coming over to the booth saying, you know, is Bryson here? Is Bryson here? Dr. Payne here? You know, can you make a introduction to Dr. Payne? And I'm like, oh, you know, I need to know who Dr. Payne is. And so, and you know, when one guy gave me his card and he was the chief IT officer for a super big bank asking me to make an introduction, I'm like, you know, it's imperative that this is the first thing I do when I go back, is I'm going to call this Dr. Payne guy. So anyway, Bryson and I have become friends because there's such a resource, an asset that we have in our community, using the platform that I have in recruiting technology companies, I like to have University of North Georgia, and they've been calling it the best kept secret. Well, it's not much of a secret anymore when people are coming to the state booth, not asking for the Commissioner of Economic Development, but asking for Dr. Payne. So anyway, it's not a secret anymore. We've got one of the best cyber education universities in the nation. And when I say, and I don't say that lightly, but in the last 4 years, the only 4 years that these teams have chosen to participate in the NSA Code Breaker Challenge. It's a challenge to say that. The 4 years that they've participated in it, they were twice second, and they won it 2 times. And when I say they won it, the difference was 250,000 points to 75,000 points, and then it was everybody else. And so they really kicked butt. And so all that, Bryson, Dr. Payne has been there to, and basically created that program, and it's been there since in the late 90s, right? So, we really do have one of the best cyber institutes in our community here, and we're working, hopefully they get the money to get a new building, and we can put more of those classes in Forsyth. Their cyber program, their master's program is actually in City Hall, and it's taught in City Hall in the city of Cumming. So we want to get that program, we want to take and leverage what they've already been doing and make that a bigger program, because in the world that we're about to talk about with these gentlemen, cyber is something that we have to pay a lot more attention to, not just in a big business, because it affects anybody. And I put in the promotion material, anybody that has a checking account or to hear this program. So without any further ramblings from me, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Bryson Payne. Thanks, Bryson.
I really appreciate it. And if y'all don't mind, I'm actually going to sit over here with this team. Really grateful to have an outstanding team. First of all, thank you to the CAB office, Empire office. Thank you to Scott, Forsyth Chamber, and Board Forsyth for hosting this event. I'm really excited to share with you some insights and some advice from this team. I won't add up how many years of IT experience are sitting around this table, but it is an honor to have some very busy gentlemen sharing the morning with us, especially given what's going on, not just in Eastern Europe, but around the world right now. So I'm grateful to Scott for the kind introduction, and I want to start by introducing our panelists. First, we have Grady Johnson. He's the CEO of Airguire. And Grady, would you tell the team a little bit about Airguire?
Oh, okay. Airguire is a global cloud integrator. We work very closely with all the cloud platforms that are out there, but as well as a lot of applications that are built natively in the cloud. We have huge security backgrounds. We do a lot of security assessments and deployments and management. But we are also a OEM play for a lot of large companies and companies up and coming regarding services and management for clients. So we have access and manage about 8 data centers globally, as well do a lot of services in multiple countries. So
great. Next up, we have Kenneth Foster. He is the VP of IT Governance, Risk, and Compliance for FleetCor. Ken, tell us a little bit about FleetCor, if people aren't sitting in the audience already with a FleetCor card in there.
Yeah, they may be and not realize it, but we're one of the many fintech companies in Atlanta that are headquartered out of Atlanta, right? They don't call Atlanta Transaction Alley for nothing, right? I've worked for a few of them over the years. FleetCor, we're a global processor of fuels cards, process those fuel cards, but we also are into lodging, logistics, core-to-core payments. So we're a global company, right? I think we're in, last count, a little over 30 something countries around the globe. I've been doing this for a little while as my beard gets whiter every day, but been a CISO twice for a couple of global companies here in Atlanta as well. So it's and I sat on the advisory boards for several startup security companies around the country as well. So
Thank you for being here this morning. I appreciate it. And Stephen Herring is a double alumnus of the University of North Georgia. And Stephen is a vulnerability researcher with Randstad USA. And I think everybody in the room has probably heard of Randstad, but they're the world's largest staffing organization. Stephen, tell us a little bit about what you do at Randstad.
So I'm largely in charge of our vulnerability management program, getting it off the ground using tools such as Rapid7 to assess our environment and start getting our teams on the right track to have a more security mindset as they're going about their day-to-day activities and maintaining all the applications and servers that we have in our organization. Being a global organization, we have a lot of infrastructure, not only in the US, but also around the world, even though the US is the largest operating company inside of Randstad.
Well, as you can see, we assembled a pretty impressive team here. So let's dig right into the questions that I'm sure everybody is interested in. So cybersecurity is the main focus of today's panel, but we have several attendees that I know are interested in the operational impact of the overall physical and cyber attack that's going on right now in Ukraine from Russia. And physical security, national security, supply chain security, they're all influences on our cyber planning, our overall business operations planning. So I want to start with questions about how your organizations are dealing with changes due to the circumstances around the war itself. Brady?
Well, for our side of the house, it's kind of up. We've increased our reviews of our internal processes and are updating our playbooks, but also kind of looking at third-party technologies, especially things for remote, especially for our clients. That's usually what we've been seeing a lot of the big risk is the remote users and not being properly updated, and just really watching that and documenting it. And also internally, making sure all of our teams are, going through the processes. We do drills anyways, but every time we see something going on, we're using that as a learning lesson to go through those drills and processes, as well as we have clients that are shifting out of regions that are now considered undesirable. So we have to go and restructure and make sure we can move that over as quickly as possible in a very compliant process. So we're constantly reviewing everything that we put in place and double checking any kind of third party solutions that are out there, and also doing the same thing for our clients. So.
And you have offices in Ireland, South America, Southeast Asia.
Oh yeah.
The US, of course.
Yeah, a lot of the access and relationships we have within Latin America, within large global data centers, we work very closely with them, and a lot of them lean on us. So we're constantly reviewing their processes, ours. And that's the interesting thing for what we do is we work with so many partners. So we're taking our best practices and taking it to the partners and helping them update what they're doing as well. Our core team is security people. I've been a CISO. I'd say majority of my team have been leading security teams. So that is our main focus. So right now we're really busy just helping, revamping our own processes a little bit and relooking at things, but really going to clients. And, it's kind of funny where the thing that I see is like year after year, it's the same thing of patches. Have you not done your patches? And it's amazing how people still don't do their patches. And the other side of the coin too is a lot of people are talking about the Russia and the things that are going on. People don't realize for the last year and a half to 2 years, Russia has already been scanning. They've already been assessing our infrastructure, and they've been documenting it and waiting for something to happen, or they're leveraging on their proxies. So we have to go back and look at people's current posture, what are they updated, and making sure that they know what next to do, and also relook at tools. All these tools that we're using are out of date, honestly, for a lot of the new multi-cloud infrastructure and DR process. Sorry, I go off on a tangent, but
great. I appreciate it. And Ken, FleetCor processes business payments globally, including in several countries in Central and Eastern Europe. What impact is the physical kinetic war in Russia, or from Russia on Ukraine, having on your operations?
Well, you think about it, and it's not just our operations, it's anybody operating globally. I don't think people understand what a development work pool that Ukraine is. Everybody kind of knows about India, that a lot of offshore development work is done in India. There is a lot of offshore development work done in Ukraine. So I think one of the biggest impacts we've seen here is just a not necessarily a ramp up in the state sponsored attack. What you've seen is the criminal organizations out of Russia have stepped up their attacks on US based companies, actually globally based companies anyway. But what they're trying to do, because of the sanctions of the globally that have been placed on Russia, Russia's economy is crashing. Those people who are criminal aspects in Russia who do the spamware and all of the hacking that's coming out of there anyway, they're looking to make a quick buck and get out, right? They're trying to get as much money as they can, as fast as they can. And they're looking for the easy, I hate to say this, but the best bang for the buck, which tends to be phishing, ransomware, spamware, that kind of thing, because it's very easy, it's very quick. But really what it's caused, the biggest thing globally, is just the supply chain impact of if you have businesses in that area of the world, right? You may have had to isolate them. B, you may have gotten them isolated whether you want to or not, depending on who your carriers and your suppliers are. Think about the large technology companies that you may have equipment in those countries that you can, if something breaks, you no longer have access to support, because as soon as they find out it's setting in Ukraine, or well, Ukraine may not have access to it. If they find out it's in Russia, they're not going to work on it. Some of the big telco carriers out there that carry internet service and phone service into Russia, or connections between US based companies, they severed service to Russia. Right? You didn't have a say in that as a business owner or a company. They just were shutting them off, no access, right? And now you have the legality issues of it, right? If you're a US based company and we have sanctions against them, you have to be very, very careful on how you're conducting business, because you may be going against US law. To echo what Grady said, you've increased your monitoring, you've isolated those countries, you're paying attention to what's going on, and it's a constant communication. And now the next phase of this, we're a service provider. So I get questions every day from people that we do business with going, how's this impacted you? What are you doing about it? What's going on? But now I have to turn around and do the exact same thing to all my suppliers, right? And going, how are you impacted? Because supply chain, as we've all seen, is become incredibly critical to all of us. And that has been one of the bigger impacts I've seen out of this. So thank you.
Stephen Ronstadt, as the world's largest staffing organization with offices around the world, customers in countries throughout Central and Eastern Europe, have you heard how this is impacting that physical war and breaking out in Europe right at the end of a global pandemic, which I'm sure has affected Ronstadt's workflow? Can you tell us what that effect that's had on operations?
Yeah, so in addition to pretty much everything you guys said, being a global organization, we're dealing with that. Like, even though we are centralized to the US, our infrastructure still ties back into our global organization. So we're dealing with the supply chain all around the world. But in addition, as far as operations go in our business of staffing, it's also presented a unique opportunity, because as these refugees are fleeing Ukraine and going into countries that they are hoping will not be affected by this conflict, Ronstadt has seen an opportunity like, hey, if you guys want to work, we have resources for you. So, like you said, there's a lot of, offshore development coming out of the Ukraine. If we can have those people leave their country, leave their home, go to another country to try and either wait it out or start up a new life, we have the ability to give them an opportunity to maintain an income, and keep working, doing what they were doing, or doing something new, and maybe even getting even more people that weren't originally affiliated with our company. So it's one of those, the double-edged sword of a conflict. In some cases, there's obviously devastation, but in other cases, there's also opportunity. So it's our way of giving to these people that are being affected, and being able to keep them in work, which in turn helps out US-based organizations as they're looking for the staff. People, some of them might have been worrying like, all of our developers are in the Ukraine. Our web guys is Ukrainian. Like, what's going to happen? And having them be able to continue to work to continue to support the US based companies that are using these people to do tasks that they may not be able to do internally. Trying to mitigate the impact as much as possible.
The global supply chain, Ken already brought up, that was already reeling from the slowdowns and the shortages caused by the past 2 years of pandemic. Have the sanctions on Russia impacted supplies for your organizations? How's your company dealing with the rise in fuel costs? What are the impacts at Aragorn?
Well, impacts for us, most of our business wasn't involved in Russia. We did have touches in Ukraine and other areas. And I would say 90% of our team is remote. So the pandemic actually staged us. We had a lot of offices and we were expanding. And then when that happened, we all went remote. So it actually kind of helped us before the gas price, in my opinion. But we're definitely seeing some movement on the clients and some issues regarding that, especially in Latin America. But it hasn't really hit us heavily on that. So.
Are you hearing from your customers that rising fuel costs are driving more people home?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's definitely a lot of them looking from what offices they have left from the pandemic. They're actually looking to finish closing those out because it's almost like, I always like to reference this for some reason, but like the old .com days where the offices started going down and everybody went to data centers. And that's what's going on right now, is that everybody's going into the cloud. If they didn't have a cloud plan, they're rushing to it now, especially companies leaving the Ukraine and other areas that they no longer can work at. So we're seeing a huge amount of activity regarding, looking at what they currently have and moving it to the cloud and management side of the house. So.
Ken, since a large portion of your company's business is dealing with fuel, how is it affecting your customers and your organization?
I mean, I think it's one of those things where you get percentage you make money off the number of transactions, right? So you don't really make money off of the fuel cost, right? But if companies start slowing down on the amount of fuel they're purchasing, those transaction numbers go down. So it can have an impact that way, right? You may lose all of the business inside one of those countries, right? Because it has to be isolated, because again, if you're doing business in that country and we have our sanctions out there, you now can no longer do that, right? Most people who operate and I think one thing that's key to remember, as privacy laws and personal data laws are constantly evolving across the globe, Russia actually has some pretty stringent privacy laws around their people's data, right? So, and just Germany and France and a lot of these, Brazil, these companies these countries are pretty picky about what you do with their citizens' data, right? So in a lot of cases, you've already kind of isolated to an extent that what is happening in those countries, because you cannot cross-border that data in a lot of cases. So is there impact? Absolutely. Is it something that it's going to be, oh no, we're going to have this significant piece of business have an issue right now? No. But what I do think we're going to see is, especially if you have employees in those areas of the world, I think the insider threat issue from a cybersecurity standpoint is amplified quicker than people realize, right? Because again, people who live over there, their economies are trashed, right? They're worried about their livelihood now. So, you may have been able to buy somebody's access to a network for, 15 grand last month. This month you may be able to get it for 5 grand or less, right? Because they want to make. So you got to be thinking about that kind of thing when this stuff's happening, right? Is those people are going to be desperate, right? Not of their own fault, right? Because most of them had nothing to do with what's going on over there, right? They're just they're citizens of a country who is doing what they're doing. But now they are worried about their livelihood, and they're going to worry about, and they may be looking for money to get out of the country. So they may be looking to make a quick buck, get some cash, move to another country. right? So they can still live in peace, so to speak. So it's something we need to be paying attention to. And I think it's something that's a little overlooked, right? It makes that criminal element, not necessarily state sponsored, but that criminal element, it makes it a little easier for them. So.
Steve, anything to add?
Yeah, just building on that, like we've mentioned a couple of times, with Ukraine having so much offshore, we use the word talent, because that's what we refer to the people that we place at Randstad as talent. As those people are working and, selling their credentials on the dark web, they're not just selling it to, their local pizza shop that they may be working at. If they're working for a US company on a contract basis, they're selling, they could be selling your network credentials. And, that when people think insider threat, I've just seen where a lot of companies will discount their contract workers. They only look at their internal employees and completely overlook the fact that, you've contracted a guy to be your network engineer and he has full access to your entire network and he could really bring you down if you really felt like it. Because I think a couple of years ago, I think it was what, 30% roughly of cyber attack was internal threat.
Yeah.
Roughly.
Well, and one thing I'll add to that is access to codes, access to production.
Yep.
If they're developing your code for your software, that's your code in production, right? So they have the blueprint of how to get into your system or how to extract out of it, right?
Yep.
So you should be thinking about how you protect your code base when you're doing this software development, because your developers have a lot of power. That's why following risk management and cybersecurity frameworks and stuff like that, you're supposed to keep development and production separate. You're not supposed to have developers accessing production. Further down the further down the size of company that you get into, you tend to have that overlap where people wear dual hats and, they look, proper cybersecurity is expensive and it also causes friction, right? It makes it hard to do your job when you're trying to be agile and do things low cost and quickly. The problem is when people are doing that, they're overlooking things that should be best practices and should be thinking about how to keep people from causing harm. And that's one of the first things, we always say one of the first things that gets cut out of budget is training. Truthfully, one of the first things that gets cut out of the budget when you start looking is separation of duties, right? Because a person is expensive. Talent is expensive. And if I can get somebody to wear 2-3 hats, it saves me money, right? But at the cost of risk reduction. So you really have to be paying attention to that.
So yeah, with that, it's talking about developing a lot of compromises on people's, in-house applications that they use, that they develop internally is usually a back door that the developer left in so that he could easily perform maintenance. And they forget to take it out, or they intentionally don't take it out so they can continue to perform that maintenance. And all it takes for one bad guy to find that out.
Well, and on top of that, I've seen a lot of that. I've seen it where the back door, or they're using some form of open source because it's speeding up the process. And you're not the only client they're working on, but that open source that's out there that's free is actually a state sponsored open source. So it allows them, I've seen, kind of talk about this. Yeah, I've seen where an open source for mobile applications and everybody ran around and started building on top of it. And I guarantee you, everybody in this room probably has something on it, or they can actually pull data. And you got to very much, like Ken said, it's got to be separated. You got to have processes in place. There's plenty of things out there in training to go through this, but it's critical. It is critical.
Secure development operations seems to be a relatively new concept to a lot of developers. So.
Oh yeah, way back in the.
We can spend the rest of the day.
Yeah, we could talk about that one.
So.
Back in the day, I sat on the board for Sun in the what used to be called the J2E certifications. It just trying to put structures in place, and it's amazing. It's still not being followed, and a lot of companies don't think about it, put the processes in there, and it's so critical for security. So.
Ken, you touched on one of those other big threats, maybe the biggest threat right now, the large number of cyber criminal enterprises operating inside Russia. not necessarily pro-Russia, not necessarily state sponsored, but allowed
They're
to exist there as
pro-money.
long as they're
Mhm.
working outside their country. Are there common tactics you're seeing that are either you attributed to Russia or Russia-based criminal groups, or
Well,
just seeing the volume?
Yeah, I think, well, the volume's definitely going up. Definitely going, like, we were all talking before this. Yesterday, apparently, it was my day to get smishing attacks regular. I got a few text messages, one of them, telling me that it was my CEO. And they knew his name, even the correct spelling of it, and they used it. The phone number I could tell because I'm sure it's a spoofed phone number, but it was still out of Tennessee. Well, our CEO's here, right? So number one, first trick, yeah, okay, that's not his phone number, right? But they're trying. They tried first. They look for a response, and then they'll chat with you for a minute. Then they're going to send a payload or a link for you to click on. Then I got the next one was somebody, hey, I saw you on LinkedIn and I'd like to ask you a question. Well, that's what LinkedIn's for. Send it on LinkedIn. That way I can ignore it there. But, no. But I think we're seeing an uptick in that. I think one of the things like Russia, and if you've not looked into this, there's some great books out there about it. Krebs wrote a great book about it called Spam Nation, right? Just spam, ransomware, right? Phishing. That is going to continue to be a problem. I can go online right now and probably spend less than $100 and pick out anybody that I just don't like that day and hire ransomware as a service and can attack them, right? And if I attack their entire business, because I can probably enumerate most of the people who work for them somewhere online, and it's pretty easy to find who they work for, what their email nomenclature is. It's pretty easy to find. And I probably will get one or two without even trying, right? And that's just if somebody's mad at you, right? Russians, they run it as a business. They have office buildings. They work in shifts. They have help desk. It is a business. This is, and I mean, I think that's what people need to understand is this is not some teenager sitting in their basement just trying to get money off of you. This is a multi-billion-dollar business that they can send out all these attacks, and ransomware is so easy.
Yeah.
And the problem is because none of the tools we have, we can block some of it. We can catch some of it. What we can't catch is the innocuous link that gets through into somebody's email and you click on it and go to the website that then downloads the package and starts that off, right? And it's going to be quiet because they're going to do it in pieces because they know what our tools are capable. They know the capabilities of our tool probably better than some of our own people who are supposed to be working on these tools, right? So they know how to sneak it in little pieces and then know how to detonate it and know how to do recon and listen. So your teams have to understand what those TTPs and IOCs are and be paying attention and monitoring and watch that stuff. But I hate to say this, but the human is the easiest thing on the planet to hack. You don't need to hack anything. You just need to be able to get to the right person who is not necessarily doing anything malicious. They're trying to be helpful. Because who's the most helpful person at your company? Probably the person who answers the phones. Probably the reception area that they answer the phone. They're going to give out details on, so-and-so's not in the office, right? And it's not that they're doing it on purpose. It's just they don't think about it because they're trying to be helpful, right? And that to me as an attacker now, I have gathered enough information that I know where to target my attack. Now I can target which I hate that this works so easy, but it does, it's an email from the CEO or the CFO to somebody in the accounting department and says, hey, wire this money. And it'll be a small amount, the first one. The first one will be a relatively small amount. And then when that goes through and they were successful, then they're going to come back with the bigger amounts. And they will keep doing it until it gets stopped. Now, the great thing about it is nowadays, because that happens so much, if you catch it within 72 hours, you can get your money back normally because it goes into a holding account when it gets wired overseas, sits there for 72 hours, and then you can normally get it back. But if it's more than 72 hours, that money's gone. right? So it's just, the human is so easy to hack.
Yeah.
So
And that 72-hour window is really important.
It's really
Several
important.
Businesses get hit with a wire transfer like that. And if you don't catch it by that 71st hour, you're really in trouble.
Definitely. The only comment I want to throw in there is the companies that Ken's talking about, they've been around for about at least 8 years. They're not new that what Russia's been doing. So I can remember 8 years ago, you could buy packages from Russia to do hacking for you. So they have labs, they get a hold of the tools, they test them. So it's a full-blown business and they've been around.
And one thing I want to say, it's not the dark web you have to go do this on.
No,
I can do a 5-minute search on Facebook and find that service on Facebook and download it from the marketplace and do it. So don't think it's somebody who has to be super sleuthy at the dark web. They're doing it on Facebook.
Yep.
So I wanted to add on, talking on the phishing, the smishing and all that. When I was working for a service provider as a security analyst, dealing with multiple companies around the Atlanta area, one of the most common questions is, how do they know these people? How do they get this information? And with one of the client in particular, I pulled up their website, went to their About Us page, and they had their entire executive list, their email addresses and all that. And, of course, with the world that we live in, having an online presence is a necessity to do business. So it's one of those things that you have to understand those inherent risks of having a website and putting that information out there. Obviously, it's important, like if you're a smaller company, like if you have a staff page and you may only have 3, 4, or 5 people on it, but those are targets. To an attacker, those are targets. And, also when you're partnering with larger organizations, how many big companies have you gone to and they have little badges at the bottom of their page that says, these are our partners, and they're throwing all these big companies. That right there, thinking like an attacker, if I compromise this company, if I compromise company A, that could lead me to get into my real target of company B, which is exactly what the Target hacked several years ago. It was through an HVAC vendor. They got hacked through their AC system.
I was gonna say, you think about it, every technology vendor out there has what they like to call their NASCAR slide.
yeah.
So it's some presentation they're doing to you. They're gonna have a slide of all these big brand name companies that they're doing business with. If I can get a hold of that copy of slide, I know who they're doing business with. So if I can compromise a vendor or manufacturer cybersecurity technology vendors are scary if they get attacked, right? And it just happened this week, or got announced this week. Okta, right? A lot of us in the industry are using Okta. It's identity, it's access to everything. Now they got hacked through a third party, right? And some of the stuff I've seen from the report that got released, that got a guy who lost his job over releasing the information, but the Mandiant report got released publicly when it wasn't supposed to yesterday through Twitter. So, but the guy lost his job over it. But the report it was interesting to see, because how they got hacked was not some advanced hacking technique. It was a pretty simple, more or less a bad practice. With the best practices would have kept them from ever losing that data, right? Yeah. And I think one thing, the key to remember, and go back to the insider threat, I just remembered, I think about 6 years ago, maybe even 7 years ago, there was an article put out, a study that was done by one of the cybersecurity magazines out there. It said that 60% of people making less than $70,000 a year would sell their access to the company for $5,000 or less. Think about that, right? It's a pretty low number, because the key in our job is to make everybody as paranoid as we are, right? It really is. Our job is to eliminate the risk and try to raise everybody's paranoia level to what mine is, although it's probably unhealthy. But what most people do not think, that access to their company, giving away that, they're like, it's a company. They've got insurance, they've got stuff in place. It's not a big deal. What they don't think about is if it looks like normal business or something that's supposed to be happening, our tools don't pick that up, right? Most of these hacks happen in a way that they hide it, the way they get data out of your system normally and quietly over a long period of time is they make it look like a normal business process. You can grab a big chunk of data, break it up into little files, do some DNS poisoning and reroute something that looks like a business process on files you send out on a regular basis, hide that data inside there, trickle it out over a long period of time. It doesn't fire off any alarms. Nobody pays attention to it because it looks like it's something that's supposed to be happening. And the next thing you know, you've lost a terabyte database of everybody's credit card numbers, right? So it's tough. I guess is the best way to put it. Yeah.
With that network access, taking just some random employee, someone that, not even someone that's like an administrator of a domain, just regular Joe Smo in, your marketing department. If he sells his credentials, back in January, we received a special alert to start mitigating 2 CVEs in regards to Active Directory privilege escalation. And that you can take that regular network account, go to Google, type in elevate network account to domain administrator GitHub. And GitHub is a wonderful repository of a lot of really nice things and really dangerous things. I mean, and it does a lot of them, it doesn't take a lot. This particular one that I tested out was called Sam the Admin, and just download the code off Google, use a standard network user, and achieve domain administrator access and fully own someone's entire company.
Well, we had 3 really important themes here that I don't want us to leave behind. One of those was thinking like an adversary, thinking like an attacker. One of those was realizing you're a target and then training your people. I think those are 3 things that we can take back to our organizations. But I want to turn the conversation around just a little bit and say, what are your companies doing to shore up vulnerabilities and hardened systems, given the likelihood of further attacks? And what are some things that people here in the room can remember and take back to their companies?
Going first.
Well, I mean, the big thing is when it comes to vulnerability patching, just in general, good hygiene, right? I think the best way to look at this is what you'll hear it thrown out there is just cyber hygiene, right? Use MFA, use good passwords, strong passwords, use rotation, use complex passwords, make your people change it. Understand that when what people have access to, review that. Use it. You've got to be removing access that's unnecessary, right? Patch management, do it. I mean, the problem is a lot of folks, and the older the company is and the bigger the company is, the harder it is to patch, right? Because especially if you're writing custom software, because there's always a concern it's going to break something, right? The only way you can get away without patching, without following a regular patching cadence, is if you have a well thought out risk management program that is designed around reviewing all of those things, the gaps in your system, and understanding what your inventory is. You need to have an inventory. You can't protect what you don't know about, right? So make sure you have an asset management inventory, and that includes the identities. Identities are assets. Matter of fact, they're probably the most critical asset, especially as we start talking about moving into the cloud, because identity becomes your primary security control inside the cloud, right? But if you're not mature enough to have a risk assessment program where you can understand what patches are, and you mentioned CVE, I don't know if everybody in the room knows what a CVE is, but there's a database out there that is basically a number, a criticality number assigned to vulnerabilities, and it's called CVE, right? And what it now stands for escapes my memory for what the exact acronym does, but you should be at least doing criticals and highs no matter what. You should be at least doing critical and highs, moderates and lows if you can. But if you don't have a great understanding of how how exposed or how vulnerable those, or how easy it is to attack that vulnerability, you really just need to patch and test. You need to have an environment where you can patch it, make sure it doesn't break anything, have a plan to roll it into production, right? It's good cyber hygiene. Like I said, removing access, limiting people to least privilege. I'm going to throw the latest and greatest buzzword out in the industry right now that everybody's talking about is zero trust. Well, zero trust is really a buzzword around a framework around things we've all been trying to do for a long time. It's called role-based access, which means you only get access to the things you need access to.
Yeah.
Least privilege, same thing, only have access to the stuff you need to have access to. Encryption, right? Encrypt the data. If it's sensitive data, have it encrypted. That way at least, and not, don't let anybody tell you that block level encryption on that your hardware, your storage array is encrypted is going to protect you. That keeps me from stealing the hard drive and taking it home. It does nothing for if the application has access to it. Use field level or database level encryption, right? Use a strong algorithm. AES 256 has been around for 20 plus years. It's do it. Encrypt your data. And again, identities, strong passwords, MFA. If ransomware is easily defeated by MFA, just having multi-factor authentication, a second factor of authentication, will defeat most ransomware attacks, right? Back your data up, back it up in an immutable process that preferably is air gapped. And I'll add one more to that, test your backups.
As
Right?
much as possible.
It doesn't matter if you're backing it up and you're never testing it, because I've worked way too many places and know way too many people that they had a ransomware attack or something like that. They said, oh, we got backups, we're good. They go and the backups don't work. But it's just hygiene. It's good operational hygiene. And, patching is a process. Put the process in place, follow the process.
Great.
No, I mean,
Can't hit
Ken-
everything, but if you got anything else. to
no,
add,
I
that's
can
great.
pretty much hit everything. I mean, the only thing I would throw out there is, really assess what, who has access. I mean, there's so many accounts I've seen out there that of employees that have left, that are sitting there, and those are easy to pick up. People that dig in there, and I can emphasize that enough. There's so many companies, small to medium to large, that have accounts that are identities that are sitting there, credentials that are easily found, and they forgot about it. They're not turned it off properly or removed it in general. So that's the only thing I can throw out there. So
Default accounts that get rid of the default administrator
Yeah.
accounts. Because the reason the scanning and stuff works is because too many people, what was it, Linksys routers used to be, everybody
Yeah.
had one of those probably in their house at some point. The default password for all of those was admin and then password 123. If it was open to the internet, I could be in it in less than a minute.
Oh, yeah.
Right, so, and even if you still use admin and you're not using above a 14 character password, you can still probably be within an hour.
Yeah.
So you've got to, because what was the database that got released last year? Had 800 million passwords in it, I think, the stolen password database. They got released on the dark web and got put out there.
Yeah.
It had over almost 900 million, which is more people than in the world, right? Yeah, or billion passwords, sorry. It's with today's computing power and that table of passwords, your password's been exposed.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's been exposed.
Yep.
So,
So you said default account, I'll also throw in your service accounts.
Okay.
Because that's a service account. A lot of people, they set the password for it to use for that one specific application. And then it sits there because typically a service account, when people set them up, they set the password to never expire, because if this password expires and my application can't authenticate, then my entire business goes down. Because of that one password.
Yeah. Yeah.
I see you shaking over there.
Yeah, we did a work for a utility company that installed a huge accounting package. As most of you might know, utility companies with accounting packages, they're tied into everything. They can go all the way to your water meter or whatever. And we were able to get into the package because it was the same default password deployment. And so it was one of the largest utilities in the country, and we could literally turn off the power for the whole area. Actually, we actually submitted ourselves a check. So it's just it's the silly little things that get you. So, sorry.
Well, I think Scott says we have time for one more question, and I'm going to ask a selfish question because this one really interested me this week. We've got students doing research along these lines. So Russia is known for its information operations, its psyops, its disinformation, misinformation. We've seen the first wartime use of deep fakes with the Dr. Zelensky surrender video, which Ukraine did a great job of debunking right away because they had a playbook for disinformation,
Exactly.
misinformation. What do you take from this, and what do you foresee in social media disinformation? How do you see this playing out for an organization if social media or disinformation deepfakes are used against them?
No, I mean, it goes back into, big thing we do with our clients, we help them write their playbooks. There's got to be a plan of response. There's got to be drills around that. This is going to increase massively. I mean, you have the activity out of Russia, you got their proxies all over the country. There's some groups in Latin America and other stuff that are literally producing mass amount of this information. So you've got to have a playbook in place, be able to respond to it, and be able to really have your teams look at all aspects of it. I mean,
I've adopted the mantra that all media is propaganda.
very good, very good.
And it is. I mean, marketing in general and media in general are propaganda, right? It's some kind of, but the disinformation thing, Russia's good at it. They're really good at it. But the big thing is you guys got to verify, right? If you see something that that just doesn't seem quite right, go find out, research it, look into it. Don't take anything at face value, especially if it goes against what you normally have, your normal business processes or your normal daily routines. Just, you got to pay attention to it because they're good.
Right.
I mean, some of these I've seen are getting really good.
Yeah.
And, it's not like Putin woke up one day and said, I'm going to invade the Ukraine. It was something that was obviously, planned out. So one of the things that you would want to plan out is these disinformation campaigns.
Mhm.
So while Ukraine, yes, they have their playbooks and, it's working effectively, they still have the hardest things to do because they don't know what's going to come out today. They don't know what's going to come out tomorrow. They're constantly reacting. And, in cyber, sometimes that's really how it feels is we're reacting more than we are getting ahead. If we catch up to the bad guys jump 3 steps ahead immediately.
Yeah.
Like the chips and the credit cards, right?
Yeah.
They said it was the latest, greatest secure thing and it got cracked within like a week.
Oh, it was.
Well, it also only protects you against card present
Right.
purchases. So at about, in the last 2 years, that industry, we went from, probably 60% of our credit card transactions were card present transactions to now it's probably 85+% are card not present. That chip and pin on your credit card does absolutely nothing for a card not present transaction. So,
but back to the question at hand.
Yeah.
Little side tangent.
yeah.
But yeah, just reacting to those because what was one of the first things that came out when the invasion initiated? Putin said, "I'm just liberating these ethnic Russians from a Nazi government," because Nazi is the big buzzword, right? Everyone I don't like is a Nazi, and a lot of people they just see that word and they're automatically like, "Yeah, you're doing the right thing." Like those people suck, and having to combat that because Russia gets the first move.
Yeah.
In that scenario, and it's up to the Ukraine, like we mentioned, like they've been doing a good job, and they just don't know what's coming next.
Well, it all goes back to within any company or organization is they have a playbook. Is it because they know that Ukraine knew something was going to happen. And the last 3-4 years, they knew something was going to happen.
Right.
And so they created a playbook, and every organization needs a playbook for
And
response.
the only thing I'll add to that is get the playbooks and practice them.
Yes.
Right? We had
Keep
it.
them updated.
Yeah, we
Yes,
had an old.
yes.
We had an old. We've all of us who've served had a saying: "You train as you fight, fight as you train."
Yep.
carries over into the cyber world. Playbooks, you train, you practice that. That way, when something does happen, there's not chaos.
Exactly.
You have a plan, everybody reacts to the plan, somebody's gonna freak out, but for the most part, you can walk through your steps. You can calmly get through it, and if you can maintain that sense of order, you will get through it so much faster than if it's just everybody running around the room with screaming, the world's on fire, right? You've got to be able to walk through those playbooks.
Yeah.
To close this out, we haven't reached the end of our time, but team, audience, please join me in thanking our panel.
Thank you, Bryson. Gentlemen, thanks. I appreciate you guys coming over. Some of you drove like an hour and 15, 20 minutes to get here. So we appreciate it very much. This was some great information. I think it was Ken. I think I am adequately stressed a little bit more.
Good job. You did your job.
I have a question. Is a VPN safe? If I do not like using open Wi-Fi anywhere. So I'll always do it with my phone.
It's better than open Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
Again, it depends on how it's encrypted, B, how well if you're using MFA and other things, because if you get a VPN, here's the bad thing about a VPN. I'll put the VPNs are good for most cases. Bad thing about VPN, if I get your credentials and I have a trusted connection that looks like a normal business process, and some companies tend to forget about putting all their tool sets and monitoring sets on VPN. That's been a big exposure that COVID, the pandemic, caused, is people started putting people at home. And even though they may have had VPNs to a corporate device, they then realized that their incident response plans, their playbooks, their monitoring tools did not have the access and the visibility into the VPN. So if one of those devices got compromised, you now had a trusted connection coming into your environment that didn't have the monitoring tools or the capability to sever that if something was going on wrong. So yes, they're good, but they can be used for evil, just like everything.
Yeah.
So
Well, darn.
I make sure.
I had a plan. I had a
it's a good
plan.
step.
Yeah.
I had a plan. You just
Still want
killed.
to watch shows you can't watch in the US. It's good for that.
I was do a lot of online banking, but I'll only do it using my phone as a hotspot from a coffee shop.
That's not a bad way to approach it.
Yeah.
But if I got a VPN, am I safer?
If you're banking, if it offers you MFA and strong, again, the biggest thing you can do with that stuff is use MFA, and use a strong password, and don't use the same password
For all of it.
Yeah.
for everything, right? Your email account and your bank account password should be very, very different.
Well,
Don't use your biometric, your Face ID and your thumbprint
yeah.
on your phone.
Okay. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it very much. Stick around. You guys, if you have questions, please, will you guys stick around and answer some questions? Because these are all business owners and I'm sure, just like my VPN thing, they got a question or two for you. Thanks. Thanks, everyone, for coming.
Thank you.